What makes a great legal mind? Maybe it's someone that's graduated UCLA at the age of 19 and Harvard Law School at the age of 22, making them one of the youngest graduates in the 200-year history of the law school. Or maybe becoming a federal prosecutor who helped capture and successfully prosecute a fugitive murderer and drug kingpin who terrorized Southern California. Or maybe it's someone who lays down their whole career to practice law, defending those who are less fortunate. If you ever wanted to hear a great legal opinion on some of the biggest cases that has taken place in recent history, this is the one for you. Join me as I talk with one of the greatest legal minds of our generation, attorney and author Neama Rahmani, on this episode of True Crime, Authors and Extraordinary People.
Welcome to True Crime, Authors and Extraordinary People, the podcast where we bring two passions together. The show that gives new meaning to the old adage, truth is stranger than fiction, and reminding you that there is an extraordinary person in all of us. Here is your host, David McClam.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another episode of True Crime, Authors and Extraordinary People. Of course, I'm your man, David McClam. Hey, if you guys haven't already, make sure you follow us on all of our social medias. One link to a link tree will get you every link you need to have pertaining to the show. All right, so if you've been following the calendars, you know what time it is. It is once again time to talk to another author. Once again, I have a guest, though, that fits both, as far as I'm concerned, my author and my Extraordinary People segment. So we'll let you decide. Let me tell you who my guest is. He is a former federal prosecutor who helped capture and successfully prosecute a fugitive murderer and drug kingpin who had terrorized Southern California and was featured on America's Most Wanted. He is also the co-founder and president of West Coast Trial Lawyers, a renowned Los Angeles personal injury law firm with a team of 21 attorneys who have taken on some of the world's largest corporations, including Walmart, FedEx, JP Morgan, and he's won $1.5 billion plus in settlements for their clients. He is a regular legal commentator on ABC News, Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, Court TV, and several other leading TV networks where he educates the public about criminal trials and legal injustices in our society. He has 20 plus years of experience in the legal industry, and he graduated from UCLA at the age of 19 and Harvard Law School at the age of 22, making him one of the youngest graduates in the 200-year history of the law school. He is the author of Harvard to Hashtag, My Journey from Big Law to Business Owner, the co-host of the podcast LA Legal, and one of the most successful and nationally recognized attorneys. Please welcome Neama Rahmani. Neama, welcome to the show, man.
David, thank you for having me, man. Super excited to be here. Congratulations on your 1-year anniversary, by the way.
Thank you, man. Glad you could be here with me for it. This is going to be exciting. So let's get into it, man. You're multifaceted. We're going to talk about some crime cases with you, but we're going to also talk about what you do now, which I feel is very important with helping people get out of those lawsuits or winning those lawsuits of personal injury. The first thing that comes to mind, being that I have someone with your brain and your mind, it just came through. What is your thoughts on the January 6th situation right now? Proud Boys leader Enrique Tarrio, they just sentenced him to 22 years in prison for his part in that. A lot of people felt like this would not happen. From the legal mind, what's your thoughts on that?
As a former prosecutor, I got to tip my hat to the Department of Justice. And not the easiest prosecution, right? When you're prosecuting folks for conspiracy, people that weren't actually physically in the Capitol. And obviously, look, we're talking about some of the most politically charged prosecutions in U.S. history, but they're important. These are people that try to subvert our democracy, attack our Capitol building. So I think it's a righteous case. I think government was asking for 33 years. Sentencing got pushed back a little because of illness, but this is a pretty big win for the DOJ. So I think it's the right result. I think it's the just result, and I'm proud of my former colleagues there.
No matter what side you sit on, do you feel that at some point, if we haven't already, that we have to hold President Trump responsible for what happened that day?
I think so. And I think no one is above the law. I don't care if you're Donald Trump. I don't care if you're Joe Biden, Mike Pence, Hunter Biden, Hillary Clinton. You're talking to a former prosecutor. You break the law, you got to go down. So, we're talking about, Trump's actions. We can kind of take them one step at a time. But, obviously, I think the least important case is the Stormy Daniels case out there in New York. We'll kind of set that aside. But look, I think the classified documents case is important. I distinguish that case from, Pence and Joe Biden mishandling classified documents because the National Archives asked for the return of the documents for more than 1 year. They told former President Trump, hey, if you don't return them, we're going to make a referral to the DOJ because the archives can't enforce the law. Trump ignores the archives. DOJ issues a grand jury subpoena. Trump allegedly moves the documents with his co-conspirators. That's where all the obstruction of justice charges come. And look, obviously, the mishandling of classified documents is important, but this is also one of those cases where really the cover-up is worse than the crime. You can't be ignoring subpoenas. And then, obviously, then the DOJ has to take the unprecedented act of having the FBI raid Mar-a-Lago. There's a search warrant there. And if you look at all the substantive counts in the case, they're really documents that were seized pursuant to the search warrant. There weren't any documents that were returned voluntarily. So I think it's a righteous case, one that should have been brought, and frankly, one that could have easily been avoided had Trump simply returned the documents. Turning toward the election fraud cases, obviously a little bit more difficult to prove, but also very important. Really, the foundation of our democracy is the peaceful transition of power. And I'm not saying Trump couldn't have litigated, couldn't have audited, couldn't have demanded a recount, but really the fake elector scheme, calling the Georgia Secretary of State, telling him to find the votes, this is going too far. So I think the prosecution is just, the prosecution is correct. Again, a lot of folks on the right aren't going to like me saying that. They'll say, well, what about Joe? What about Hunter? And what I'll tell them, look, if they've broken the law, they too should be prosecuted.
On this show, I get ran down too, because if you listen to any of my episodes, I say it like it is. I wasn't a Trump fan in the beginning, a lot of things he stood for, but he wants to run again. And I don't feel like that just as an American, because of what happened, we can trust him back in that office. And yes, being that I'm on the Democratic side, I don't overlook either what's going on with the current administration. We have to look at that. Politics has become so out there these last several years. But I just feel like a lot of life was lost in that January 6th that could have been saved, like you. And I hope that we can move on from it as society and heal from it down the line.
I agree. Look, and people said, well, what about Hunter Biden? And, I'll say like it is. I thought Hunter Biden got an extraordinarily good deal. Now, I don't know if it's because of his lawyer. I don't know if it's because of his dad. Or I don't know, frankly, if he cooperated and pled early. But you don't see diversion really ever in federal court. Really rare. Misdemeanor dispositions are also pretty uncommon. No-time misdemeanor deals. So, look, I'm going to say Hunter Biden got a great deal. Maybe Trump is being treated differently. But again, a lot of it is because of how he handled, inquiries by the archives and the DOJ and that type of thing. Look, you can litigate it. You can use our justice system. You can't spread lies and misinformation. It has real consequences. And, I do believe that January 6th was a result of Trump's actions.
So let's talk about a couple of cases that I know you know very well as well. One, I'm going to give you the opportunity to eat me up because I kind of had a change of heart. And I know that you talked about on your podcast about Casey Anthony. That they released that Where the Truth Lies. Now, if you ever listen to my episode on that, I tell you that I was with the rest of America at one point. I couldn't stand her. I thought that she was all of this and that. But then when I watched Where the Truth Lies, I thought I kind of saw a different side of Casey. There was things that I felt like I did not see in her trial. Her body language was different. Certain emotions she had when she talked about certain things about her father. Am I reading this wrong? Do we still feel that she's guilty from a legal mind? Did she pull one over on us? What's your take on that?
Well, it's hard for me as a trial lawyer, as a former prosecutor. You're sort of trained and taught not to question our jury system, right? We're not there. Look, I might cover these cases for court TV and Law and Crime, but unless you're actually in the courtroom, you're watching the case every single day. it's something that lawyers are saying, listen, you trust our jury system. It's not perfect, but it's the best system there is out there. But I got to tell you, if you ask people about the 2 cases in this country that were really wrongly decided, maybe 3, I think they'll kind of go down. Casey Anthony 1, O.J. Simpson 2, and the officers that beat Rodney King will probably be 3, right? Although those officers 2 of the 4 were subsequently convicted in a federal case. But I think that'll sort of go down as, the cases that people now, obviously now some people think Kyle Rittenhouse, might be 4, but really a Casey Anthony is just the case that people still think, and it's just because of her actions, not inside the courtroom, but really outside the courtroom. People will say, is this consistent with someone who has a missing child? I mean, I don't care how you feel about your kid, are you going to be out partying? Are you going to not report it? And it's just a case where I got to tell you, David, the vast majority of Americans, the vast majority of lawyers even, they don't say it, think that the jury got it wrong there. And in fact, there have been some jurors that have come out and have said that they regret their decision in that case.
Wow, it was just, I mean, I don't know if it was the way it was staged or the way they were, writing it up, because, they made sure you understood that she did not have control over the questions that was asked. But she was doing things that, to me, unless it's a big act, like she admitted she lied, and then she was carrying photos, of Kaylee around and the whole 9. Now that she can't be convicted ever for it again because of double jeopardy, what's your thoughts? Do you think she should just come out and just tell us what she knows? You feel like that there's more that she does know she's not saying?
I don't know. I don't think, you're right about double jeopardy. She can't be, convicted again. I mean, she did get hit with those 4 misdemeanors, I believe, but even that, went up on appeal. I mean, look, she's a free woman, but she's still so disliked. I can't imagine her doing an OJ tell-all book, like, if I did it, if I killed my kid, make all this money off it, because she still has to live the rest of her life. I mean, she's a young woman, and the last thing she wants is more media attention. Writing a book or doing a documentary about it, that's not a good idea. Because look, I mean, if she says something, even though the jeopardy is attached to the murder case, but there might be some way, and you kind of saw it with Bob Durst, right? Where he said something stupid, and the prosecutors found a way to really open a cold case that otherwise had been closed for quite some time. I'm not saying that Casey Anthony has killed multiple people like Bob Durst, but I think the conventional wisdom and the advice is you should just keep your mouth shut, take the win, and move on.
I agree, because, like you just said, they're finally come back and get you. Look at OJ, right?
Yeah, exactly.
He his trap, and now we went to jail for something totally different. If they want to get you, they're going to come get you. So be quiet.
Exactly. Take the one right off into the sunset there.
So let's talk a little bit about the most biggest celebrity case ever. You've talked about it. Johnny Depp, Amber Heard. I'm a huge Depp fan. I called BS on this when she went to sue him. In my opinion, I thought Johnny Depp was the very best witness I've ever seen. He was cool. He was calm. He didn't lie. I mean, he admitted to things that he did. What do you think about the Depp-Heard case? Where did Amber Heard go wrong?
I got to tell you, I agree with you. I didn't always agree. And well, let me tell you what. I think Johnny Depp was one of the best witnesses I've ever seen on the witness stand. He was likable. He was credible. He was vulnerable. He talked about the abuse he suffered at the hands of his parents. I mean, compare and contrast that to Amber Heard, who really was caught in what I would say is unnecessary lie after another, right? Contrast it to Depp, right? Depp's there. He's admitting all sorts of drug use, right? And Amber Heard gets on the stand and she says she's only used drug once, on the plane when Depp gave her a pill. Where even if you look at her wedding schedule, it was clear there was a time that they blocked off to do drugs, right? And then, the TMZ, it was clear that either she leaked it or someone working on her behalf leaked it to TMZ, but she's there denying it. The whole pledging the money to charity, but not paying it. Like, you got to get up there. You got to own those bad facts. And if you get caught in a lie, jurors aren't going to like you. But I'm going to confess that I did not think Depp was going to win before the trial started. And this is why. I was one of the folks, I'm the first to say when I was wrong. He lost so badly in Europe. The defamation laws are much more favorable to plaintiffs, much easier to win. That's what these defamation lawyers, they file in Europe. And he lost bad, and The judge there, obviously not a jury, but a judge, found that it was substantially true that Depp abused Heard multiple times. Now, obviously, I wasn't covering that trial, wasn't televised like the one here in the US, but based on that judge's ruling, I thought, wow, he's going to come here and much more difficult, right? Because, I mean, for folks that don't know, in Europe, the burden is on the defendant to prove that the statements are true. Here in the United States, the burden's on the plaintiff, the person suing, to prove the statements are untrue. So different burden. And not only that, here in the US, because Johnny Depp is a public figure, he's got to prove actual malice. That means that Heard knew the statements were false or acted with reckless disregard for the truth. So much higher legal standard here. Now, I think one of the things that Depp did was getting a good jurisdiction. He could have filed in LA, very liberal when it comes to First Amendment issues, or New York. He was there in Virginia, which is a little bit more of a mixed bag. But I think outstanding lawyering and really just great testimony by Johnny Depp and his witnesses, and a lot of strategic legal mistakes by Amber Heard and her team as well.
Well, I'm with you. I thought Johnny Depp had no chance of winning in the States after, he lost overseas. I kind of feel like Amber Heard kind of felt that same thing. So that's why she wanted to go full throttle with it. And, like you said, there's a lot of shortcomings on his part. But I felt from the things I was seeing that the abuse that he was going through at her hands was far worse at many times than what he was doing. He's admitted drug use before even then, and then alcohol. Now the question is, do you feel that he'll get his career now that this is over back on track? I know he's back signing with Disney again. Do we think his future is going to be bright now?
Oh, I think so. I mean, Johnny Depp, it's one of the greatest comeback stories in Hollywood history. I mean, there's someone who was canceled and was dropped by every one of his sponsors except Dior, I believe, right? Now he's the most wanted man in Hollywood. I mean, he's a hero. A lot of folks, look at Amber Heard, a lot of men, frankly, as the face of Me Too that's gone too far and false allegations. And again, Johnny Depp is an A-list celebrity that's vindicated himself. So I'm sure everyone wants him. Look, if Disney's calling, then they certainly see no issues with Johnny Depp.
Well, the one thing is the outpouring of fans. I have personally told my wife and my kids, I'm like, if Johnny Depp's not in Pirates of the Caribbean, I'm not going to watch it. I had read what they wanted to do, but you just can't change a show that Johnny Depp's made. That's Johnny Depp's show. He's one of the greatest actors of our generations. And to switch him out and put somebody else in there just doesn't look right. Sweeney Todd, also the same thing, right? You just can't change these things up. So, yeah, I hope the best for him now that, this is over with. I do feel that Amber perjured herself quite a bit. There's a lot of things she was doing in court, as you know, that she probably shouldn't have done. And I think that did aid to her losing the case.
Yeah, I think so. I think she came out as a liar. And again, it's a few of those things that I talked about, just unnecessary lies, in my opinion. I think if she owned, look, like for instance, on the donating the money to charity, she said, listen, I was planning to donate it, but then I got sued by my ex-husband and I'm not rich like him. I have to pay these lawyers. Now, let's just be honest, right? They cost money. Or look, I was getting a divorce. I live in LA. Look, I have a good relation with TMZ, but I know they got people at the courthouse, right? Sometimes I file something, they're going to know. So I wanted to get some good press and I wanted folks to feel sorry for me. So I tipped them off. Look, that's what publicists do all the time in LA. How else does something from your camera, your phone, right, get to TMZ? Unless TMZ is hacking into your phone or someone else did. Look, you sent it or someone that has access to your phone sent it. Just own it. And I think these are some mistakes that, she made. And obviously, look, we know that her legal team also, made some bad mistakes. They opened the door to Kate Moss and the stare incident. Then she comes and denies it and says how much she loves Johnny Depp. And so lots of mistakes were made in the case, some self-inflicted wounds. I mean, who knows if the result would have been different, but I think the reason she lost so badly is because of, her testimony and some of the strategic decisions her lawyers made.
Now, speaking of mistakes, the last one I have to ask you about before we get into what you're doing currently is Darrell Brooks. Now, as we know, this man decided to represent himself, did not go well. He got 6 consecutive life sentences, plus an additional 700 years for the Waukesha Christmas parade attack that he did. I've always laughed because I'm like, when you get life sentences. We're not going to live 6 lifetimes. We need to throw 700 additional years. I'm like, to bring them back and make them serve more. As a prosecutor, how bad did this ache you, or did it ache you at all to see that this guy is going to represent himself with no lawyer, doesn't know anything he's doing?
Yeah, it was painful. That's a case I covered live on TV. And, here's someone that obviously has no legal training. And it was one outburst after another in the courtroom. I mean, the judge had to remove him several times, admonish him. I mean, obviously, look, the guy has some serious mental health issues. I mean, you got to be to do something like this. But it was one of the most painful trials I've ever covered, because there's no question he was going to be convicted. He really had no legal defense. He didn't say that, he suffered a seizure or that, he didn't intend to do it. He basically was trying to say, look, it wasn't me. Like, how close were you? I mean, if you look at the cross-examination, there's all these, there's tons of victims. There's tons of witnesses. The prosecution basically stopped putting people on because it would have been overkill. And it was basically trying to convince these jurors that it wasn't him driving the car, which was a terrible argument. Plus, he's arguing with the judge, raising all sorts of ridiculous legal arguments and objections in his filings with the court. So he's actually a pretty smart guy, but really sort of emotionally was unhinged. And it was just a bad combination. And it was a tough trial to basically cover and to watch.
Do you feel that the sentence that he received was justified for what he did, or was it overkill?
Whenever you kill multiple people and you intend to injure more, it's gonna be a life sentence. It's rare that you're gonna have multiple murders and get anything less. Reality is that every judge in this country is either elected or appointed by someone who is, right? So, same thing with prosecutors. And I'm not saying politics doesn't matter. It really shouldn't matter. But when you have a high-profile case like this, and you have multiple people dead, really multiple innocent people, right? There's no legal justification. This wasn't like a self-defense type case or a drug deal gone bad. It's people on a Christmas parade. It was really a foregone conclusion that once he was convicted, he was going to get life.
Now, I can tell just by looking at you, hopefully the audience can see, how passionate you are about the law, being a prosecutor. So how do we move from being a prosecutor, now we're into full-time personal injury law? What made you make that switch?
I love being a prosecutor. Greatest job in the world. And I'm going to be honest with you. If I didn't have a wife and kids, I'd probably still be a prosecutor. My wife, she's a lawyer. She's an attorney for foster kids. So what happened was we were both working for the government. Well, she's working for a nonprofit, plus sort of a quasi-government type agency. She's representing foster kids. I'm representing the people doing these prosecutions. And we have 2 kids back to back. And we're living in LA. And we were broke. And we sat down one day around the dinner table, and we had our kids in our small condo, and she said one of us needs to get a real job, and that one of us was me. So I almost went back to the big firm. I was at O'Melveny and Myers. They said, come back and see if you can generate some business and see how you do, maybe make partner or something like that effect. And then my current partner now, his name's Alan. He actually hired me at a law school a long time ago, back in 2001. He left and he started his own firm, and he was doing plaintiff's work. And I said, Neama, come join me, start a new firm, and let's do PI, let's do employment, let's do civil rights. And I said, PI? I went to Harvard Law, I'm a former pro. Why would I do PI? I don't be that guy on some billboard or bus bench. And he's like, no, you're going to like it more than defense work. You hated defending corporations. This is like being a prosecutor, but actually getting paid. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, look, you're representing the little guy. You're on offense, not defense. You're pursuing righteous cases. And that's a lot better than defending criminals or corporations and people with the ability to pay. So he kind of sold me on this as the next best thing to being a prosecutor. And I'm glad he did. It's been about 10 years. And short of putting the bad guys in jail, I like making them pay. So this is the next best thing.
Can you tell us a story? I mean, your book, Harvard to Hashtag, My Journey from Big Law to Business Owner, is full of them. It's a very passionate written book. I've interviewed another person like yourself who was really into making sure the little guy won. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how you do that, because your heart truly is in it, and you are really not in it for the money, but you really want to help people. What's one of your most memorable cases that you can think of right now of some of the big corporations that you sued where your client won?
You know, I really like cases where it's kind of a civil and criminal component. There's a really sad case that we handled. It was an adult, but it was a dependent adult. His name's Timothy Cortinas. He was a man in his 50s, but severe special needs, was nonverbal. And he lived in a group home, and Easter Seals was responsible for taking him to and from his home, to his medical appointments and that type of thing. Well, one August day, his driver picks him up, takes him to where he needs to go. Instead of bringing him home, the driver goes to his own house, leaves Timothy in the car. This didn't come out at trial, really, but the reason he took him home is the driver started texting a prostitute, and forgot about Timothy in the car. Well, after several hours, Timothy suffers the most horrific death where the temperature of the car goes up. He's unable to even open his own seatbelt, and he dies. So we sued Easter Seals. We sued the group home. We worked with the DA's office to get him prosecuted to get justice. But at the end of it, getting a pretty significant sum of money, getting a felony conviction and time for the perpetrator. So that was a pretty righteous case. And I could tell you, I would not have liked being on the other side of it.
Wow. Now you sued some big people: Walmart, FedEx, JP Morgan, $1.5 billion plus and counting. When you go into these big cases, when you have these big corporations that has loaded pockets, what's your first measure of attack? How do you know you're going to be able to bring them down?
Well, a lot of folks don't like going to trial. I can tell you that whether it's Uber, whether it's Walmart, they're going to litigate the case. And look, and then they might push the case to trial, but usually they're going to try to get it dismissed on summary judgment, maybe get into arbitration. But trial lawyers like me, former prosecutors, we love juries. Defendants usually do not, because they know how jurors feel about big corporations, big businesses and what they do to people. So, I take every case, and, for every call that comes in, we usually sign up about 5%, maybe 10% on a really sort of month where we're taking a lot. We'll only sign up a small percentage of folks as clients because they're either not the type of case we handle, or we don't think it's a righteous, meritorious case. But I got to tell you, if we sign a case at our firm, we sign it with the intention of pushing it all the way. Now, it's only a small percentage of cases go to trial, but that's always in the back of my mind. I tell my clients, listen, you sign up, you got to be ready to go the distance. And that's usually my first thought when I'm litigating against a big company.
Do you feel these big companies are dumb when they don't just step up and take responsibility for what happened? Like years ago, there is the McDonald's case where the woman spilled the hot coffee on herself. All her family wanted was $10,000 at that point to pay for the medical expenses it would be for surgery. Didn't want that, went to trial. Do you see a lot of that? Or nowadays, are they just going to sell it out for the smaller number?
Yeah, sometimes I see what these big corporations do, or even the insurance companies. They'll do, a blanket denial or blanket sort of lowball offer. From their perspective, that's a good business decision, right? Because maybe the vast majority of folks, they either walk away, right? They don't want to deal with the litigation. Look, we lawyers love it. I love being in court, but I can't tell you that all my clients do. Sitting through a deposition, having, their medical history become an issue, psychological history, having to sit with me at trial. But the corporations do a business analysis and they say, well, hey, if, 90% of the people will take nothing or take a small amount, why don't we, have this practice across the board? So, once in a while, they got to be hit with a big verdict to put them on notice. And really, it's really kind of a question of risk. And that's how insurance companies analyze these cases, right? For them, it's not like, well, what's the right thing to do? For them, it's, well, what's the right business decision, right? They're in the business of paying out as little money as possible. That's their job. Whereas ours is to do right by our client. So I think that's why they do what they do. I mean, I've been on the other side. I don't think it's the right thing, but that's why I encourage people, look, if something bad's happened, don't try to handle it on your own. Call a lawyer. It doesn't have to be me. Just call any lawyer, get some advice, because going at it on your own is the worst decision that you can make.
What evidence does someone need to actually win a personal injury lawsuit?
Yeah, so when we're analyzing personal injury cases, it could be any case. It could be wrongful death, could be fender bender, dog bite. Doesn't matter. The same kind of principles apply. We look at liability, damages, and coverage, right? The ability to pay. So liability is who's at fault. California is an at-fault system, right? So, if you're seriously injured, but it's your own fault, well, guess what? You're not going to be able to collect. Now, there are certainly no-fault systems, like workers' comp is one of them, right? You're injured at work, doesn't really matter whose fault it is. Some states are no fault. But California, we got to prove who's at fault. So it could be, a slip and fall. It can be, a car accident. It can be an employment case, right? If I can't prove a person was sexually harassed or discriminated against, then we don't win. So we always analyze liability and fault in every case. And actually your damages, what are your injuries? Obviously, with death or serious injury, it's one thing, but I've seen cases where, multiple rollover and the person walks away without a scratch. I'll call me and I'll tell them, that's great. You're okay. You're not injured. You don't have a personal injury case, but more importantly, you're in good health. Obviously, I have cases where, it's not a huge impact, but, it's an old lady and she breaks her hip. Well, guess what? That's going to be a different kind of case. So we always got to look at the damages and what the injuries are. And of course, the ability to pay. Unfortunately, a lot of claims are dischargeable in bankruptcy. Not all, but I need to advise my clients, like, we're going to sue this person. Something really terrible has happened, but they only have X amount of insurance. They don't have any assets. They're going to file Chapter 7, and we'll file, and that person will sometimes go into bankruptcy, but the ability to pay matters. So those are the things that we analyze in deciding, is there a personal injury case or not, or any type of civil case.
Now, the reason I say that you're not really after that money, but you really care, is because your law firm does something that a lot of them say they do, but you really do. So you have no upfront costs at all to your client. You shoulder all of that, and you take money once you win. What made you decide to go that route?
Yeah, because when I worked for the big firm, I saw just the rich and powerful that could afford those legal fees. Some of the clients were paying millions of dollars in legal fees. So what we do is we tell our clients, listen, I'll only take your case if I'm in it with you. We're going to take a percentage. We're going to advance all your costs. We're going to have skin in the game. And if we don't, it's because I don't think that you can win your case or I can win your case. Look, go get a second and third opinion. But if I accept your case at my firm, we're in it with you the whole way. We want to make our system of justice accessible to everyone, not just the rich and powerful, because that's a big problem in our country. Look, I see it on the criminal side all the time. Look, I know a lot of public defenders. They're absolutely amazing lawyers. But a caseload that a public defender has, they might have 100 clients. They might have more. Whereas someone who is in private practice, they're going to have a smaller number of clients, and they're going to be able to devote more time to that case. At our firm, on the civil side, I don't care how much money you have. No one pays us hourly. Everyone works on the same contingency. We're in it with you because, again, we don't want our system of justice to be denied to anyone simply because they don't have money.
So besides that, why should someone choose West Coast Trial Lawyers over any other law firm that they go to?
There's a lot of good lawyers out there, but I'll tell folks some ways that really sets us apart. And I like to say the experience, the education, and the results. There's not a lot of folks that have the experience that I do. We'll work with prosecutors. We will do everything we can to get justice for our clients. If that's a civil settlement, if that's trial, or if that's prosecution. No one understands that better than someone who's a former prosecutor. That's an experience that I've been doing this for more than 20 years. I'm a regular legal analyst. People call me all day, every day, asking for my opinion on all sorts of cases around the country. There's a lot of people that do a lot of marketing and advertising, and look, I have respect for them. They're great business minds. They're doing TV, radio, billboard commercials, but they might not have even been inside a courtroom ever, or certainly, in years, whereas I'm in it all day, every day, talking about these cases. I love the law. I live it. And then our results speak for themselves. We've won our clients a lot of money. I've put more than 1,000 people in prison. I've been doing this for decades. So, like I said, I think we're uniquely situated in the space. But look, there's a lot of good lawyers out there. I don't like to say I'm better. I just say, do your due diligence, do some research. Don't call someone merely because they're just doing a great job at advertising. Probably not even going to be handling your case.
Do you feel that being a former prosecutor helps you now in your current role? And if so, how?
Oh, absolutely, because I truly understand our criminal justice system. I understand risk. I understand how to use the media. We have a lot of high-profile cases right now. We sued celebrities. And because I do so much TV, I know how to advocate on behalf of our clients. Sometimes it's better to not be in the public eye. Sometimes it's better to bring a lot of attention on the case. And you're talking about a lawyer who understands the media, understands our criminal justice system, not just the plaintiff's world, which is unique in terms of folks in our space.
Now, in your book, you don't pull any punches. You talk about where you feel the system is short. You talk about politics. You talk about, how judges want to be reelected and that can affect cases. Being that you are still practicing, why did you decide to write that book now?
So I decided to write that book because actually during the pandemic, I was being interviewed by Nancy Grace. I think it was about George Floyd, Derek Chauvin and George Floyd at the Kyle Rittenhouse. And it was during a commercial. And she said, you know what, Neama, you've done a lot of interesting things. You worked for the biggest firms in the country. You worked for the Department of Justice. You were a drug and human trafficking prosecutor. You've handled public corruption cases for the city of LA. Now you've had your own firm doing plaintiff's work. You've done it all. You should write a book. And you know what I said to myself? I'm like, I will write a book. So I got to give Nancy Grace credit for that one. It was her idea. So I just took it and ran with it.
The one thing I do want to point out to the audience, though, is that you take no money from this book. 100% of the proceeds that you donate to the Children's Law Center for foster care kids. Can you tell us a little bit about that and why you decided to do that?
Foster care and my wife's line of work representing these kids, it's really sad. Folks don't know that, more than 50% of kids that grow up in foster care, within a few years of turning 18, they either end up trafficked, in prison, homeless, or dead. They don't really have a chance. It's really sad. So, Children's Law Center, what they do is they represent these kids. These are kids that are taken away from their parents. They don't have a legal guardian. They're either in foster care. They're in between homes. They're living with relatives. And, I think, we talked about the Timothy Cortina's case, someone who was special needs, but I think children and special needs, these are the most vulnerable members of our society, and they're entitled to protection. I didn't write a book to make money. Money will always come. I wanted to educate folks, and I really wanted to make law understandable and accessible to everyone. So thanks everyone for supporting me. Every dollar from the book, all the proceeds goes to the Children's Law Center.
It is definitely a fabulous book. Everybody needs to go out and pick a copy of it up, man. My wife and I was reading it, and she had tears, the joy, and just the way that you write it. It's so the simple person like me, who's not a lawyer, can understand it. I've read many books that lawyers have written, and it has all this legalese. I'm like, I don't understand anything, but you made it very easy. I think one of the last cases I want to ask you about that you are part of is the Uber Lyft situation.
Yeah.
My wife works part-time for DoorDash, and so I was filling her in on how that case went. I have several friends who work for Uber that quit. Do you think that ever these people that is doing DoorDash and Uber and Lyft is going to be looked at equally as employees, or is this just going to be a fight that's going to have to be fought for years to come?
I'm hopeful, but it's challenging. So, first of all, I want to say thank you. We really try to make law understandable and accessible. We're probably one of the bigger firms on TikTok and on Instagram, and we'll do short videos and reels just to educate folks on anything that's coming up. So for instance, we might do something like, hey, there's your boss. Can your boss make you work during a hurricane? Something to that effect. Well, whatever is coming up in the legal world doesn't necessarily have to be personal injury or employment or civil rights, but just something where we can educate folks. We'll do 20, 30-second videos. Now, to answer the Uber question, for folks that haven't been following it, there is a big difference between being an employee and being an independent contractor. You have a lot of protection as an employee, right? You're subject to workers' compensation laws if you're injured on the job. You get meal breaks, you get rest breaks, you get overtime, you get mileage, right? If you drive your car for work, right? So, in California, it first started, there was a big California Supreme Court case, the Dynamics case, that basically said gig economy workers, they're employees, right? They're not independent contractors. And then the California State Assembly codified this in what's called AB 5, Assembly Bill 5, saying, listen, you're working for a gig economy, you're an employee, so you're entitled to protection. You're not just an independent contractor. Of course, Uber, which started as Uber Cab, but changed the name to Uber Technology, basically like, we're a technology company. We're not an employer. We're just connecting the driver with the passenger. So we're making billions of dollars, but we have no control over any of this. And what they did was, several years ago, they put this proposition on the ballot, which at the time was the most expensive proposition in California history, Proposition 22. And they basically unwound that California Supreme Court case and that assembly bill. And they convinced folks that, if this doesn't pass, Uber's going to leave the state and all these scare tactics. And, they spent so much money on this proposition and it was successful. So unfortunately, they basically deregulated themselves. So imagine, if the fast food industry, right, McDonald's, we talked about, comes and puts, a law on the books that says, you know what, our employees, they're not subject to sexual harassment laws, or they shouldn't get overtime. They're all just independent. I don't think it was right. I don't think it was fair, but it just really shows the power of these huge corporations and what they can do.
Well, I hope that does pass, man, because, in your book, you're saying how they were saying, well, they're just sitting there waiting in their car for 45 minutes and they're not delivering anything. But to me, that's working. I mean, you can't get, and I watch my wife's Dash app. If she comes home, she gets no fares. If she sits in certain spots of the city, that's when all the fares come in. So to me, that is working because you're burning up your gas, you're waiting. It's the same if I do at my current job. I have to wait to get into a store. Doesn't mean I don't get paid for that. So I hope we win that battle down the line.
I agree. We're still litigating it. Hopefully we win. But, so far, unfortunately, because of, this proposition, it's been bad for the gig economy workers. And really the saddest thing is how Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, they convinced their own workers how this was better for them to be independent.
The last thing I want to ask you is near and dear to my heart. One of the biggest reasons, besides my religion, is I'm against the death penalty. You and I being minorities, you being Iranian, me being African-American, wrongful convictions. And I know, as you know, 21,000 plus years is lost in prison for 24 plus persons who later were found, 2,400, plus persons later found exonerated. A lot of that goes to, brown and black people. How do we start putting an end to these wrongful convictions?
It's such a hard question, right? Because as a prosecutor, the worst thing that I thought I could do is put an innocent person in jail, right? There was a famous judge in England called Justice Blackstone, and he said that it's better that 10 guilty men go free than one innocent person ever suffer. And that's how I handle myself. If I have any doubt, I'm going to pass on that case. There's plenty of people to go after. Unfortunately, prosecutors are people. I hope they do the right thing, and they don't always do. We know that law enforcement sometimes doesn't do the right thing. We have a history in this country where police officers haven't been prosecuted. That's changed recently. Fortunately, we're seeing them being held accountable in a way that we haven't my entire life. I don't know what the answer is. Obviously, there are prejudices and biases in our justice system. I dealt with it myself as an Iranian. If you read my book, I dealt with racism at the Department of Justice. I was born in the United States. I had all these credentials, Harvard Law, big firm. I still dealt with it. So if I can deal with it, I can't imagine being a criminal defendant and having to answer to a judge and jury that might feel the same way. So I wish I had the answer for you, David. I don't know what it is. I do know that I think it's getting better, but it's certainly not anywhere near where it needs to be. And I'm hoping that people are involved in our system, whether it's judges, juries, defense attorneys, and especially prosecutors, man. I just implore upon them to do the right thing. Hold everyone accountable. We started with the show saying, doesn't matter whether you're Donald Trump, everyone should be held to the same standard. Doesn't matter how rich, how powerful, your race, your sex. Let's just have a colorblind system of justice. I hope we can get there. We're nowhere near there yet, I don't think, but I really do hope we get closer to it during my lifetime.
In closing, is there anything that you would like to say to the listeners or some of your fans that might be listening out there today?
What I like to tell folks is make sure you understand the law. I mean, it's so incredibly important. Such a, for instance, how you deal with law enforcement. every lawyer will tell you, you have a right to remain silent, exercise your rights, know your rights. And unfortunately, I think in this country, a lot of people do not. So whether it's, social media, whether it's the news, try to get at least a limited understanding of the law. And if you don't, call a lawyer. Do not try to handle these types of things on your own. It's no different from me saying, go get a checkup with a doctor, go to the dentist, If you have any legal questions, call a lawyer. Don't try to handle these things on your own, because that's where people get into a world of legal hurt.
Well, Neama, first of all, I want to say to you, man, thank you for caring about the little people. There's a lot of lawyers that doesn't even have the degrees and the education that you do, not even half as good as you, that is all about the money. And we need people like you out there to help the little people who can't afford those hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars. I thank you for that, man, because I don't know, maybe one day I may be in that situation. I'm certainly not rich. And if that happens, I'll be sure to look you up. So thank you for looking out for the little man, for looking out for these children. Yes, foster care is horrendous. I personally feel, as far as DCFS goes, that LA County has the worst DCFS system there is. I've covered a couple of cases that way. So thank you. And I'm glad you came on the show today. And any time that you want to come back, please let me know, and you're welcome anytime.
Thank you so much for having me. So proud of what you've accomplished and excited to be back again in the future.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. All right, guys, that was the incredible Neama Rahmani. You can find his book, Harvard to Hashtag, My Journey from Big Law to Business Owner, at Amazon and anywhere you can buy books. Remember, 100% of the proceeds from the sale of his book is donated to the Children's Law Center of California to support children in foster care. Neama believes that it is the most vulnerable members of our society, and I have to tell you that he is right. So make sure you're supporting him. Anything else you want to find out about Neama, you can find it on my website, truecrimeandauthors.com. Also on his website that will be linked in the show notes of this episode. All right, guys, thank you for tuning in. It has been an incredible year so far, a great start to season 2. I thank you for choosing me. I hope you're being good to yourself and each other. And always remember, always stay humble. An act of kindness can make someone's day. A little love and compassion can go a long way. And remember that there is an extraordinary person in all of us. I'll catch you guys on the next one.
Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe. Join us on social media. One link to the link tree has it all. Feel free to drop us a line at truecrimeandauthors@gmail.com. Cover art and logo designed by Arslan. Sound mixing and editing by David McClam. Intro script by Sophie Wild and David McClam. Theme music, Legendary by New Alchemist. Introduction and ending credits by Jackie Voice. See you next time on True Crime, Authors, and Extraordinary People.